Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. NWT Fire says a change in wind direction in Fort Good Hope could lead to flare-ups in previously burned areas. The Northwest Territories community is currently under an evacuation order, and its chief told people who stayed behind to help fight the fire to get ready to go in case they need to pull people out. For the latest on the fire, we're joined now by Shannon Graff. She's a fire information officer with the government of the Northwest Territories, and we've reached her in Norman Wells. So Shannon, can you give us an update on the fire's behavior today and any potential flare-ups?
So with the hot, dry weather that we're experiencing here and in Fort Good Hope, the expectation is that it is going to heat up. With the winds right now, the fire is actually traveling away from the community. It could meet up with the areas that it has previously burned. We do expect that to cause some flare-ups or hot spots. That's where we've got crews. They're monitoring all of these. We've got helicopters bucketing the spots, and a water bomber is also overhead so we can action anything that might flare up.
Yeah, I wonder if you can describe a little bit more to us about what the fire efforts looked like today, what crews were working on.
So starting last evening, they did about an 800-meter cut line to the Hare Indian River, and following that, they lay sprinklers, and they worked on that until about 3 a.m. Then started planning what we call a small-scale ignition operation. So that's where there's an intentionally set fire. We use it to remove any vegetation that might be in the wildfire's path, and it cuts off its path towards values like cabins. That operation started at approximately 1:30 this afternoon. The latest report is that the operation went well and that line is currently holding.
That's really good news. And just to confirm as well, so far there's been no loss of homes or cabins due to this fire.
That is correct.
Okay, that's also really good news. You talked about the hot, dry weather. I wonder if you can describe what the conditions are going to be like this evening and maybe into tomorrow morning, and how that might impact the situation.
So again, hot, dry weather, like much of the NWT, we're expecting that to continue through the evening and the next few days. With those southeasterly winds that we were talking about, again, it will push the fire back, which is likely to cause some flare-ups or hot spots. The winds are only going to be gusting till about 20. So that does make it slightly more manageable for crews. And again, it's just keeping an eye out for those hot spots and monitoring as much as we can.
And is there anything in particular you're expecting crews to be able to tackle tomorrow morning when they hit the ground again?
So the focus going forward is really to maintain the current containment line around the community, and it's just to prevent any further encroachment towards the community or any values in the area, particularly from the north. Other than that, it's just going to be, again, those hot spots that are along the line, any flare-ups that we can treat, we're going to, again, with the helicopters, the water bombers, and our crews on the ground.
Okay, thank you for the update, Shannon.
Thank you.
That's Shannon Graff, a fire information officer with the GNWT in Norman Wells tonight. RCMP have made an arrest in connection with a hit and run earlier this month in Whitehorse. The collision left a cyclist dead. Chris Windier has more. This is the...
Police say they arrested Adam Lougheed of no fixed address on Tuesday. He faces charges of driving while prohibited, dangerous driving causing death, and failing to remain at the scene of a collision. RCMP say the 41-year-old man was already under a Canada-wide driving ban and already faces other charges in Alberta, BC, and the Yukon. In fact, Lougheed was already in police custody when he was arrested. He's also facing numerous charges related to a stabbing and a vehicle theft in Whitehorse on June 18th. Police say the victim in that incident sustained non-life-threatening injuries. Lougheed remains in custody following his first court appearance on Tuesday, and RCMP say dashcam and security footage provided by the public helped with the investigation. Chris Windier, CBC News, Whitehorse.
And just a quick note about the images at the very beginning of that. Those are images from the Fort Good Hope fire. They're not related to Whitehorse in any way. To Nunavik now, where Umiuyak's mayor is in hospital after an attack in his home by a colleague. David Isapa was seriously injured from the incident on Sunday night and was medevaced to Montreal. A 47-year-old municipal employee has been charged with assault causing bodily harm. The disagreements were believed to have begun earlier in the day.
The information that we have is that the assault is linked to an argument that happened earlier that day between, or a word exchange that happened earlier that day between those two people.
At the moment, it's not clear if anybody else was involved. A former Iqaluit RCMP special constable has been sentenced to 9 years in federal prison, which is beyond what both the Crown and Defence had asked for. Mosesi Ikidlak was found guilty of 3 counts of sexual assault. It first happened in 2008, then twice in 2021 when he was with the police force, all to the same victim while she was asleep. The Crown and Defence had jointly asked for a 4-year sentence, but Justice Paul Bychuk called that proposal, quote, out of whack and unhinged, as it undermines the severity of Ikidlak's offences. He adds that there's a systemic failure in Nunavut to treat sexual violence seriously. In the Yukon, the MLA for Vantakwitchin is stepping away from the role for a while. In a social media post, Annie Blake says she needs to focus on her mental health, which she says is suffering because of several traumatizing events and deaths of friends and family members. Blake says she plans to return to the role when she recovers. And in the Carcross Tagish First Nation, Mariah Benoit has been re-elected as chief, or Kashada Hene. Benoit received 101 votes in yesterday's election. Charlie James came second with 45, and Ashley Carville was third with 37 votes. Changes are coming to Iqaluit's taxi companies in a bid to make it safer for passengers. City Council passed a bylaw last night to cater to those with accessibility needs. The new rules will also stop people convicted of serious crimes from becoming drivers. The CBC's Samuel Watt explains.
For years, Noah Papatsi has pushed for better accessibility on Iqaluit streets as a former city councillor and as a disability advocate. Now, finally, some progress. Most Iqaluit taxi providers must now have at least one accessible vehicle available at all times.
I'm really happy there's an accessible taxi. That's a one step forward for safety.
The next step, he says, is what happens inside the cab. Things like appropriate communication based on a person's physical and intellectual needs, which as a blind passenger, he's had troubles with.
It's very important that people with disability are taken care of properly, not just dropping them off on a corner.
He also wants more consideration for Inuktitut speakers. The city's main taxi company, Caribou Cabs, doesn't currently have any vehicles that meet disability standards. Business Administrator Ronnie McGregor says one is now on its way by ship. As for creating better understanding about a passenger's accessibility needs,
that's where the new project comes in, right? There will be specialized training because it'll be a project dedicated to adapted transport.
There are other safety elements written into the bylaw. People convicted of violent crimes will be barred from applying to be a driver. Those with a pardon can still get a permit in some circumstances. Caribou Cab says all of its current staff right now meet those new requirements. Samuel Watt, CBC News, Iqaluit.
Shelters in Yellowknife are struggling right now to keep up with the number of unhoused people in the city. The men's shelter at the Salvation Army has been over capacity every night for the past year by a lot. Sometimes the shelter is at more than double capacity, with people sleeping in hallways and common areas. It's so bad, they have to scale it back. Tony Brichette is the director of the Yellowknife Salvation Army. He says over the next couple of days, the men's shelter will begin reducing its numbers until it's back at its capacity of 31 people. Brichette says both the GNWT and RCMP are aware of the plans. He describes here the effect of the overcrowding and the recent changes to Yellowknife's unhoused population.
We had shelter users who one we were all evacuated to mostly Calgary and Edmonton. They met up with family and friends down there who were in the homeless situation there and told them, you should come to Yellowknife. Life is so much better up here. And they came here, and now they are a part of our shelter system. We can identify close to 20 individuals who are new shelter users whose home address would be different than Yellowknife. And these are younger people. They're a little rougher than our guys are used to, so it's added a whole new dimension to the mix of people in the shelter. The biggest thing we're hearing is we have long-term shelter clients who are saying they're afraid. They're afraid to be in our shelter. There's nowhere else for them to go. And I think of one individual in particular who's been with us for almost a decade now. He comes in at 7 o'clock when we open. He eats his evening meal, and he now goes out and hides in the back of the building until we open the dorms at night, because he said he doesn't feel safe sitting in the common spaces with the other guys. He's an older gentleman, and he says they rob him. If he has cigarettes or if he has a little bit of cash, they take his money. And it's difficult to control when you have 3 to 4 staff and you have up to 60 men who are most of them have had a rough day. So by the time we get them at the end of the evening, it doesn't take a whole lot to set them off. We had the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness come in February and spend 2 nights in our shelter. They interviewed all of our staff and the clients that were using the services for those 2 nights. And all of our staff exhibited some forms of, early stages of PTSD, because they're saying as soon as we come on shift now, we're breaking up fights. And then for the full 8 hours you're there, it's the same type of thing. And it's night after night after night for them. So we're trying our best to do what we can to mitigate that problem, because nobody should have to come to work and deal with that every night, nor should the clients who have no choice but to use the shelter system have to come in every night and feel threatened from the moment they're there.
That was Tony Burchett with the Yellowknife Salvation Army. Tonight, the city of Yellowknife is hosting a roundtable on homelessness. That starts at 6:30 p.m. at the Tree of Peace Friendship Center. We do have a team covering that event, and we'll bring you more on it tomorrow. A global advocacy campaign took to the streets of Whitehorse today. The movement is called Support, Don't Punish. It calls for drug policies that focus on human rights and harm reduction and safe supply. Virginie Anne has that story.
For all of those who attended the march, the message is clear. Punishing and shaming substance use is not the way to go.
Anti-stigma is our best harm reduction tool. I mean, naloxone surely keeps people alive, literally. It brings people back to life, and that's an amazing tool. But stigma is what keeps people using alone, which is the biggest risk.
Felix Olaney has been working with Blood Ties for 3 years. They say the conversation has definitely changed, but Olaney says there's still a lot of misunderstanding about what support means.
People only have access to fentanyl, which is illicit and unregulated and dangerous. So that's why we advocate for a safer supply. Sometimes people use substances for very specific reasons. Support means not judging and not demonizing or dehumanizing people who use substances for very real reasons.
The march happened the same day NDP MLA Annie Blake announced she's taking medical leave to address her own substance use. In a social media post, she said recent trauma had left her coping in unhealthy ways. When asked about it at the march, NDP leader Kate White struggled to contain her tears.
It's real, right? Like when we talk about ending stigma, when we talk about ending shame, it's real. Like I think that too many people in our communities feel shame, and so they use substances alone, and they use substances, I'm going to say in the dark, but figuratively in the dark, and that has led to lots of deaths. And any death that is by overdose is preventable.
White says she's not seeing a lot of support for drug decriminalization or safe consumption sites from the Yukon's other political parties. Over the last few years, the Yukon has posted the highest rate of deaths due to opioids in the country. Virginie Anne, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Many Northerners are remembering Natalie Gillis tonight. The 34-year-old pilot, outdoor guide, and photographer died in a plane crash near Albany, New York last week. Gillis spent a lot of time in Nunavut, hiking, guiding, and flying. She spent 2 years flying for Canberra Air. Her friends and loved ones are remembering her as ambitious, cheerful, talented, and humble.
She always had time and space for other people, and you really almost had to work to find out about, the things that she had accomplished, because she was forever chatting to people about what they were up to.
Gillis was a regular pilot in Nunavut, flying between communities on southern Baffin Island. She was also a frequent hiker and guide in Nunavut's parks. Most recently, she was working for a Montreal-based airline. She died June 17th when her twin-engine plane crashed about 3 kilometers from the Albany International Airport.
Treaty in Cree is Naskomitoin, an oral agreement, and our agreements were always spoken. For George Spence, the core of treaty was Wichihioin, to help one another.
And so we, the commissioners,
He was there for the making of Treaty 9, where the Cree were told,
we will honor this agreement together for as long as the sun shines and the waters flow.
the Cree made their mark because they were assured that the land would be shared and they would always be able to harvest what they needed. George Spence was my great-grandfather. In his life, he saw many promises of the treaty go unfulfilled.
Treaties were essential to the creation of Canada. First Nations still fight for the agreements to be honored.
You promise me that you won't look back. There's gonna come a time you'll feel the darkness. You don't let them win.
How does someone just disappear? How can I be in love with something that was never there?
We are not a dying people. We are here and we are speaking.
I had a vision that I one day would be free again.
It is my right, it is my privilege, and it is my heritage.
When we see Team Canada on the world stage, we're witnessing pure greatness. What we don't see is their struggle. We don't see Maggie McNeil navigating her anxiety, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander getting cut from his high school team, or Ellie Black hearing she's just too old to compete. What we don't see makes us who we are. We're all bravely facing the odds in our lives, and our bravery is our victory.
It's about 140 kilometers from Inuvik to Tuktoyaktuk along the highway. Since it opened, it's become a draw for motorcyclists looking for adventure, just like the Dempster Highway is. But with limited service along the way and constantly changing road conditions, it's not for everyone. And as Des Lorraine found out, those who do make the trip are using social media to make it friendlier and safer.
People sharing their experiences with each other online, making them better prepared for a long trip to a remote area. They're motorcycling up the Dempster Highway, and they're using social media to stay up to date with current conditions.
I think it's super helpful. I can't imagine, 20 years ago not having a lot of information on what the road conditions would be like. But it's kind of a double-edged sword because you have all kinds of different abilities of riders chiming into that Facebook group, and some people are like, oh, it's a piece of cake, you can do 80 the whole way, and other people are like, we turned around.
These are a particular one made in Korea, and they have worked beautifully so far.
The group Dempster Highway Adventure Riders has 9,400 members and is updated multiple times a day, keeping people apprised on what they can expect on the road. Some are choosing to travel in packs, while others are choosing to make the trip solo.
Make sure that if you're going to do it alone, that you understand that it's going to be an awful long way without seeing an awful lot of people. But if you can get past that, it's the trip of a lifetime.
There is also the GNWT road conditions map that can be found on its website. Quan Watson is in Inuvik from Edmonton, Alberta. He says originally he wanted to make the trip all the way up to Tuck, but looked at the road conditions online and changed his mind. Even though he didn't get to do the final leg of his trip, he says it's still been worth it. Des Loreen, CBC News, Inuvik.
Not quite a motorcycle, Des, but it will do. Motorcycles are not the only way adventurers are traveling the territories. In addition to Des on his bike there, one man did it just by river. But he didn't paddle a canoe, he didn't kayak, he swam it, the Yukon River. 510 kilometers of it from the end of Lake LaBarge all the way to Dawson City. That is 2.5 days of swimming. There was no sleeping, no stopping. So how did it go? Take a look.
So my name's Ross Edgley and I am an ultramarathon swimmer. For me, the Yukon represented so many challenges, so many dangers as well, but it was also the perfect swimming pool if we got it right. So you'll know, obviously the glacial lakes, everything's melting, so that makes it really, really cold, but also makes it very, very fast. So we had to get everything right. And you know, with the River Quest, people come from all over the world to paddle, canoe, kayak, various things. If they can do that, could you swim it? And they said, in theory, practice might be very different. And this idea just evolved. And then after 6 months of planning and preparation, I arrived in the Yukon and we went for it. There was so many things on the swim that if it didn't happen, it just simply wouldn't have been possible. And what I mean by that was the sun coming up on the second day. So when hypothermia was setting in, you know, I was really shivering from my core. All of a sudden, the Yukon just decided to just gift us this amazing sunrise. It came over the mountains, and just feeling the sun on your skin, it's indescribable. It was a strange feeling. Like finally touching land, like first of all, you can't trust your legs because you've not used your legs for the 60 hours. So just trying to crawl out, I am just like, on all fours. Legs are coming out from under me. It was not very dignified. It wasn't the heroic end that I sort of envisioned in my head, but it didn't matter. It was an end. The exact distance was 510 kilometers. The entire expedition, I believe, was 60 hours, but I think I was in the water for 54. It was a history lesson as well. I've never been to Canada. This was my first time. So to do it and to learn about it this way was amazing. I recommend it to everybody. If it's your first time to Canada, go down the Yukon.
What a wild journey. You heard Ross there mention the Yukon River Quest. He was just ahead of all those racers on the river because that event kicked off this morning in Whitehorse. And they are off over the next 3 days. 74 teams of paddlers, kayakers, and canoers, no swimmers though, will race the Yukon River to Dawson City. They pushed off from Shipyards Park today, and while the weather was good in the city, Race Marshal Stephen Mooney says crews are keeping an eye on wildfires further north.
They've tended to blow themselves out. The wind is changing direction, and I think we've got a great race ahead of us.
A total of 12 countries, including Estonia, Germany, and Australia, are all represented in the race, along with several charities. Paddlers are set to arrive in Dawson City starting on Saturday. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. We leave you tonight with a look at the Sawtoo Aviation Museum in Norman Wells, where the CBC's Travis Burke saw some pretty cool historical planes and other vehicles. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
Are you ready to be entertained?
Stand-up comedy, best comedians from across the globe.
Oh, great.
An incredible lineup.
Canada.
Are you ready?
Oh. Are you kidding me? CBC's got the best in stand-up comedy.
That's pretty unbelievable, man.
It's a scam. It's a scam.
No f***ing way.
Ooh, it's a bit spicy.
It'll change your life.
Catch it all free on CBC Gem.
Well done.
Y'all give it up. Give it up. Give it up.
That same woman from the SEC keeps calling. Can I give her your number?
No.
Michael Lazaridis, want to come and answer some questions?
Why is the SEC looking at us? I'm sure it's nothing. Yeah.
I'm just wondering how you convinced all these engineers from around the world to come all the way to Canada. Do you know what the sentence is for multi-million-dollar stock fraud?
I did not know what my future would look like.
The industry wasn't set up for me to thrive in.
I didn't realize how formative 25 to 30 would be.
I was so excited when they said I got to do an interview with you.
Q with Tom Power. Available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
You promised me that you won't look back. You don't let them win.
I had a vision that I one day would be free again.
We are not a dying people. We are here and we are speaking.
We're not gonna be here forever, right? Makes me want to make some changes, maybe a big one.
Never really a good time to stir the pot.